think that Roald Dahl was a World War II flying ace? How many of you think he was an international spy? How many of you think he was a TV show host? How many of you think he was the kind of person who would name his own daughter 20? Well, actually, he was all of this. But how many of you think he wrote stories that libraries thought were terrible?
Yeah.
How many of you thought he wrote poems that were too scary for children? How many of you thought he wrote a famous spy movie for grown-ups? How many of you thought he wrote funny versions of the news for TV? Well, he did all of those things too. See, Roald Dahl, his real life was crazier than you could make up. In fact, when he wrote his own autobiography, Boy and Going Solo, he made up a lot of stuff in those because he thought that was more entertaining than talking about things that really happened. For instance, in real life, the principal from his school went on to crown Queen Elizabeth as Queen of England. Do you think that was crazy enough for him to write in the story? Well, no, he had to make up a story of how mean that guy was as the headmaster and how he did horrible things to one of Roald Dahl's friends. That really wasn't the same guy who did the horrible things to Roald Dahl's friends. Or, when he was a fighter pilot, he crashed his plane. Do you think that was exciting enough for the way he wanted to put it into his own biography? No. He talked about how not only was he shot down by the enemy and crashed in the desert, but after he crashed, the bullet from his own plane caught fire and shot him, which is how he got injured. That wasn't exactly how it really happened. But that was the kind of person Roald Dahl was. He made up stories not just about his own life, but about everything around him. Now that got him into trouble more than one time because people didn't like the stories that he told, especially when he claimed they were true and they were made up. But then, sometimes he had to make up things too, because he really was a spy, and he had to make up stories for what he was really doing when he was being a spy. And when he was a spy, he got to know another English writer who was also a spy. Ian Fleming, the guy who wrote the James Bond novels later. And so, when one of Ian Fleming's books was being turned into a movie, Roald Dahl wrote the screenplay for one of the James Bond movies and for one of Ian Fleming's children's books called Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Roald Dahl wrote the screenplay. But even better, Roald Dahl wrote for grown-ups too. And some of the stuff he wrote for grown-ups you may have seen on TV and you don't know it was by Roald Dahl. Because lots of his stories were adapted for television or radio or movies, but not the ones you think. For instance, Alfred Hitchcock used to do a really cool, scary show for grown-ups. Stories with murders and horrible things happening in them. And there was a story in there about someone who committed a murder with a leg of lamb. It was frozen. And then she put it in the oven and cooked it and served it to the police when they got there to investigate the murder. Well, that was based on a Roald Dahl story. Alfred Hitchcock thought that was really one of the funniest stories he'd ever read and thought it would be cool to adapt that for television. But Roald Dahl didn't always have happy things in his life. He had some sad things too, and he did some strange things with those. For instance, his son got very, very sick after being in an accident. And he found that the doctors were having trouble making his son better because they had to put a valve in his head to drain blood, and it wasn't working right. So he checked around and the doctor said, well, none of those valves work right. So you know what he did? He got together with a couple of people that he knew and they invented a better valve for use by doctors. And thousands of children around the world had these installed in them when there were emergencies and they needed head surgery to keep their brains from being damaged. He really did invent a medical device that was used for thousands of children. So he was an inventor too. His wife was a famous actress, Patricia Neal. She was a really cool major actress. She'd already been in a bunch of movies before they got married. Well, she got really sick at one point. And the doctor said, well, she's not going to get much better, so we'll just send somebody an hour a day to give her some therapy. Roald Dahl said, that's nonsense. And he spent 6 hours a day working with his wife on physical therapy and speech therapy to help her get better. And she made it all the way back to being an actress again.
And how long did it take?
It took a couple of years before she was better, because she was really sick. But there was something funny that happened as a result of that. You see, one of the jobs that his wife got hired for after she got better was to be in commercials on TV. And she got to be the person for a company called Maxwell House Coffee. And she would be in the coffee commercials, and she would be pouring coffee for her husband in the kitchen. Well, they really used Roald Dahl to play her husband in the commercials. So Roald Dahl was in a bunch of coffee commercials with his wife after she recovered from being so sick. But then that was just at the start of him writing books for children. You see, he had been writing books and stories and poems for adults for 20 years before he wrote anything for kids. And he wrote James and the Giant Peach. He sent it out to publishers. And they said, that's a terrible idea. Boy, those people are mean to that kid. So he sent it to different publishers. And they said, what a horrible thing to do. That's the most disgusting story we've ever seen for children. So he sent it out to more publishers. And finally one of them said, well, okay, because your adult books make money, maybe we can do something with this. And so they published James and the Giant Peach. When his wife, Patricia Neal, was sick, she would say things and mix up words. Or she couldn't remember the real word for something, and she would have a word that would make sense to her, and she would say that. And Roald Dahl would have to figure out what she meant. And so she would say things like, come light me an obligon. And he would go, what? You know, an obligon. That was her word that made sense in her head for what a cigarette was. You didn't know how the Little Red Riding Hood and the Three Little Pigs were connected? Well, I'm going to share with you how they were connected. The animal I really dig above all others is the pig. Pigs are noble. Pigs are clever. Pigs are courteous. However, now and then to break this rule, one meets a pig who is a fool. What, for example, would you say if strolling through the woods one day, right there in front of you, you saw a pig who built his house of straw? The wolf, who saw it, licked his lips and said, that pig has had his chips. Little pig, let me come in. Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. The little pig began to pray, but Wolfie blew his house away. He shouted, bacon, pork, and ham! Oh, what a lucky wolf I am! And though he ate the pig quite fast, He carefully kept the tail till last. Wolf wandered on, a trifle bloated. Surprise, surprise, for soon he noted another little house for pigs. And this one had been built of twigs. Little pig, let me come in. Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Well, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. The wolf said, okay, here I go. And then he began to blow and blow. The little pig began to squeal. He cried, oh, wolf, you've had one meal. Why can't we talk and make a deal? The wolf replied, not on your Nelly. And soon the pig was in his belly. Two juicy little pigs, Wolf cried, but I'm still not satisfied. I know full well my tummy's bulging, but oh, how I adore indulging. So creeping quietly as a mouse, the wolf approached another house. A little piggy trying to hide, a house which also had inside a little piggy trying to hide, but this was piggy number 3, who was bright and brave as could be. No straw for him, no twigs or sticks. This pig had built his house of bricks. You'll not eat me, the piggy cried. I'll blow you down, the wolf replied. You'll need, pig said, a lot of puff, and I don't think you've got enough. Wolf huffed and puffed and blew and blew. The house stayed up as good as new. If I can't blow it down, Wolf said, I'll have to blow it up instead. I'll come back in the dead of night and blow it up with dynamite. Pig cried, you brute! I might have known. Then picking up the telephone, he dialed as quickly as he could the number of Red Riding Hood. Hello, she said. Who's speaking? Who? Oh, hello, Piggy. How'd you do? Pig cried, I need your help, Miss Hood. Oh, help me, please. Do you think you could? I'll try, of course, Miss Hood replied. What's on your mind? A wolf, Pig cried. I know you've dealt with wolves before. Now I've got one at my door. My darling pig, she said. My sweet. That's something really up my street. I've just begun to wash my hair, but when it's dry, I'll be right there. A short while later, through the wood, came striding brave Miss Riding Hood. The wolf stood there, his eyes ablaze and yellowish like mayonnaise. His teeth were sharp, his gums were raw, and spit was dripping from his jaw. Once more, the maiden's eyelid flickers. She draws the pistol from her knickers, and once more she hits the vital spot and kills him with a single shot. Pig, peeping from the window, stood and yelled, well done, Miss Riding Hood! Ah, Piglet, you must never trust young ladies from the upper crust. For now, Miss Riding Hood, one notes, not only has 2 wolfskin coats, but when she goes from place to place, she has a pigskin traveling case. Now that was the way Roald Dahl thought. And that was the way he wrote stories for both grown-ups and for kids. He would twist ideas, he would twist words, and that would make you think of things in a different way than you had never thought before. Had you ever thought of the connection between Red Riding Hood and the 3 Little Pigs before? No. And that was what Roald Dahl wanted you to think. He wanted you to think outside the box, or where there's no box at all. And so, we have another contest for you. We had a word search, and we had a crossword puzzle. But this is the real Roald Dahl type contest for you. Because you're going to get to Gobblefunk.
Yay!
You get to make up a word and what it means. So each of you gets one of these. And she had other funny words that made sense in her head because she couldn't speak right. And after that happened, and after he worked with his wife, that's when he started putting in funny words in his stories. And more of them over time until in bookstores today, there's a whole book of words that Roald Dahl made up. Now, you had a question about that?
I didn't have a question, but when you said the
Yes, and that is exactly the most complicated gobblefunk that he had to do. Because, well, gobblefunk is the word for when you make up words. Did you know that? Because he had to make up a word about making up words, otherwise it wouldn't make any sense at all. The BFG had the most gobblefunk in it, and that was because he needed the giant to speak in a whole other kind of way of thinking. Just like when his wife was recovering from being sick, and she had a whole different way of thinking. I'm going to start off with this because this is such a marvelous word. Because this word is gobble-toggy-duck. And it means hi. Well, hi to all of you, and we're going to read some gobblefunk words because Roald Dahl had so much fun making up words. And as she mentioned, a lot of them were in the BFG, but a lot of his other books had made up words too. And so I'm glad so many of you got into the spirit of doing this. For instance, somebody came up with the verb priggling, which means to abduct. And then
you'll begin with a spin, traveling the world in migration. What you'll see will defy explanation.